A janitor and a millionaire CEO. One working the night shift, the other living in a penthouse. Two different worlds, two different lives. But that night, fate had plans. And sometimes the greatest miracles happen in the most unexpected hands. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. when Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart into the elevator of Manhattan's most prestigious office building. At 42, he had been working the night shift at Meridian Tower for 8 years, invisible to the powerful executives who ruled the corporate world during daylight hours. Marcus was a man who understood his place in the world's hierarchy. With calloused hands and a weathered face that spoke of years spent in manual labor, he moved through the gleaming corridors like a ghost, ensuring that the wealthy and powerful would return each morning to spotless offices and pristine conference rooms. Tonight felt different, though. The building was unusually quiet, even for the late shift. Most nights, a few workaholics would still be burning the midnight oil, their office lights creating a scattered constellation against the dark cityscape. But tonight, the upper floors were shrouded in darkness, all except the 47th floor. As the elevator climbed higher, Marcus mentally rehearsed his routine. Executive floor meant extra care, polished marble, expensive artwork, and furnishings that cost more than he earned in a year. The 47th floor housed the offices of Meridian Industries, top executives, including the corner office of Richard Blackstone, the company's CEO and one of the city's most powerful men. Marcus had seen Richard Blackstone exactly 3 times in 8 years. Each time, the man had walked past him as if he were part of the furniture, expensive, perhaps necessary, but ultimately invisible. Marcus harbored no resentment about this. It was simply the natural order of things. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Marcus stepped into the hallway. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. He began his work methodically, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces with the quiet efficiency of someone who had performed these tasks thousands of times. That's when he heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. A groan, deep, pained, and unmistakably human. Marcus froze, his cleaning cloth halfway across a desk surface. The sound had come from the direction of the corner office, Richard Blackstone's office. The lights were off, and Marcus had assumed the space was empty. Another groan, weaker this time, followed by what sounded like something heavy hitting the floor. Every instinct told Marcus to mind his own business. He was a janitor, not a security guard. His job was to clean, not to investigate strange noises in executive offices. But as the silence stretched on, something deeper than job security compelled him forward. He approached the office door cautiously. The frosted glass was dark, but a thin line of light leaked from beneath the door. Marcus raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What if he was wrong? What if he was about to embarrass himself in front of the most powerful man in the building? Then he heard it again, a gasping sound that removed all doubt. Marcus tried the door handle. It was unlocked. He pushed the door open slowly, and what he saw made his heart race. Richard Blackstone, the man who commanded boardrooms and dictated the fates of thousands of employees, was lying on the floor beside his massive desk, clutching his chest with both hands. His face was pale and slick with sweat, his breathing shallow and labored. "Sir?" Marcus called out, rushing into the room. "Sir, are you all right?" Richard's eyes found Marcus, and for a moment, confusion flickered across his features. Through his pain, he was trying to process the presence of the night janitor in his private office. "Can't breathe," Richard gasped. "Chest hurts." Marcus had seen this before. His father had died of a heart attack when Marcus was 23, and he recognized the signs immediately. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees beside the fallen executive and pulled out his cell phone. 911, what's your emergency? "I need an ambulance at Meridian Tower, 47th floor. A man is having what appears to be a heart attack." While giving the dispatcher the details, Marcus loosened Richard's tie and unbuttoned his collar. He had taken a CPR course years ago as part of a community program, and though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it, the knowledge was there if necessary. "Stay with me, sir," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Help is coming. Just try to breathe slowly." Richard's hand, soft from a lifetime of desk work, reached out and grasped Marcus's calloused fingers with surprising strength. "Please," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus replied firmly. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Marcus stayed beside Richard, monitoring his breathing and pulse, talking to him constantly to keep him conscious. He told Richard about his daughter's graduation from community college, about the small garden he tended behind his apartment building, about anything that came to mind to keep the man's attention focused on something other than the pain. When the paramedics finally arrived, Marcus guided them to the office and provided them with all the information he had observed. As they loaded Richard onto a stretcher, the executive's eyes found Marcus one last time. "Thank you," Richard mouthed silently before the paramedics wheeled him away. Marcus stood alone in the opulent office, his hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. He looked around at the mahogany furniture, the awards covering the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. This was a world he would never inhabit, populated by people who lived lives he could barely imagine. But tonight, none of that had mattered. Tonight, he had simply been one human being helping another. Marcus finished his shift in quiet contemplation, wondering if he would ever see Richard Blackstone again, and if he did, whether the man would remember the janitor who had stayed with him during the longest 20 minutes of his life. 3 days passed before Marcus received his answer. He was restocking supplies in the janitor's closet on the 15th floor when his supervisor, Jimmy Chen, approached him with an expression Marcus had never seen before, a mixture of confusion and something that might have been respect. "Marcus," Jimmy said, "you need to come with me. The big boss wants to see you." "Which big boss?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The biggest one, Richard Blackstone himself. He's back from the hospital, and he's been asking for you specifically." Marcus felt his stomach drop. In 8 years of employment, he had never been summoned to an executive office during business hours. He couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, despite having potentially saved the man's life, he was about to be in serious trouble. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt endless. Jimmy accompanied him in silence, clearly as bewildered by the situation as Marcus himself. When the doors opened, Marcus was greeted by Richard's personal assistant, a perfectly groomed woman in her 30s who looked at him with undisguised curiosity. "Mr. Thompson?" she asked. "Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you." Marcus nodded, suddenly conscious of his worn work uniform and the lingering smell of cleaning chemicals on his hands. He followed the assistant down the hallway he knew so well, but seeing it in daylight, bustling with activity, felt like entering an alien world. The corner office looked different during business hours. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows, and Richard Blackstone sat behind his desk, looking pale but very much alive. He was wearing a crisp white shirt and navy tie, every inch the powerful executive. But something in his eyes was different from the few previous glimpses Marcus had caught of him over the years. "Marcus," Richard said, standing as he entered, "please, sit down." Marcus remained standing, uncertain. "Sir, I hope you're feeling better." "I am, thanks to you." Richard gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit. We need to talk." Reluctantly, Marcus sat on the edge of the leather chair, his work boots looking out of place on the expensive carpet. "The doctors told me that you likely saved my life," Richard continued. "If you hadn't found me when you did, if you hadn't called for help, I might not be here right now." "I just did what anyone would have done, sir." Richard smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "That's where you're wrong, Marcus. Most people would have minded their own business. Most people would have assumed someone else would handle it. You didn't. You took responsibility for the life of someone you barely knew." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It wasn't a big deal, really." "It was to me." Richard leaned forward, his expression intense. "Do you know what I realized while I was lying in that hospital bed? I realized that in 48 years of life, I have surrounded myself with people who want something from me. My business partners want my money. My board members want my approval. Even my friends seem to want access to my connections or my influence." He paused, studying Marcus's face. "But You helped me without knowing who I was. You stayed with me without expecting anything in return. You treated me like a human being, not a bank account or a business opportunity." Marcus didn't know how to respond to this. The silence stretched between them until Richard continued. "I want to offer you a job, Marcus, not as a janitor, but as my personal security consultant. The position comes with a six-figure salary, full benefits, and the opportunity to learn from the best security professionals in the business." Marcus's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't know anything about security. I'm just a janitor." "You're a man who notices things. You're someone who takes action when action is needed. You're trustworthy. And in my world, that's rarer than gold." Richard stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I've spent my entire career surrounded by people with impressive degrees and polished presentations. But when my life was on the line, it was a man with calloused hands and a good heart who saved me." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "I need to think about it." "Of course, take all the time you need." Richard turned back to him. "But I hope you'll say yes. I think we could learn a lot from each other." That evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment, staring at Richard's business card. His daughter Sophia called, as she did every Tuesday evening. "Dad, you sound different tonight," she said. "What's going on?" Marcus told her about the past few days, about finding Richard, about the job offer that seemed too good to be true. Sophia listened without interrupting, a habit she had developed during her college years. "Dad," she said finally, "what scares you more, taking the job or not taking it?" The question cut straight to the heart of his hesitation. Marcus had spent his entire adult life in jobs that were safe, predictable, and beneath his potential. The idea of stepping into Richard's world was terrifying, but the idea of staying exactly where he was for the rest of his life was somehow worse. "You know what Mom used to say," Sophia continued, referencing Marcus's late wife. "She used to say that opportunities don't come looking for you twice. Maybe this is your chance to see what else you're capable of." The next morning, Marcus stood outside Richard's office in his best clothes, a slightly wrinkled shirt and pants he usually reserved for church. When Richard's assistant announced his arrival, Marcus stepped into the office with a decision made. "I'll take the job," he said without preamble, "but I have conditions." Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Let's hear them." "I want to keep working some evening shifts as a janitor. Not here, but somewhere. That work. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me who I am." "Done. What else?" "I want to learn everything you're willing to teach me, but I also want to teach you some things." "Such as?" Marcus thought about how to phrase what he wanted to say. "You live in a world where people tell you what they think you want to hear. I want to be the person who tells you what you need to hear, even if it's not what you want to hear." Richard was quiet for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Deal." 6 months later, Marcus Thompson stood in the same corner office, but everything had changed. He wore a well-tailored suit now, and his hands, while still bearing the calluses of his previous life, also bore the confidence of someone who had discovered capabilities he never knew he possessed. He had thrown himself into learning about security, business strategy, and the complex web of relationships that governed Richard's world. More importantly, he had become Richard's trusted advisor, the one person in the executive circle who owed him nothing and therefore could be counted on for absolute honesty. "The Henderson deal is a mistake," Marcus said, reviewing a contract on Richard's desk. "I know the numbers look good, but I've been asking around about Henderson's company culture. They treat their employees like garbage. You associate with them, and eventually that reflects on you." Richard looked up from his computer. "The profit margin is substantial." "So was the profit margin on that factory we didn't buy last year because I told you the safety record was questionable. 2 months later, it had a major accident. Sometimes the right decision costs money up front, but saves your reputation long term." Richard smiled. "You know, my board members spend millions on consultants to tell them what they want to hear. I get better advice from a former janitor who tells me what I need to hear." "Former janitor who still cleans offices 3 nights a week," Marcus corrected. And who's learning more about business from those conversations with night security guards and cleaning staff than most executives learn in their MBA programs? Their partnership had become legendary within the company. Richard's decision-making had improved dramatically, his employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed, and his reputation in the business community had never been stronger. But more than that, he had gained something he'd never had before: a genuine friend. "Marcus," Richard said, closing his laptop and leaning back in his chair, "do you ever regret taking this job?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I regret not taking chances like this earlier in my life, but I don't regret this one." "Do you regret offering it?" "Never. You saved my life in more ways than one." Richard stood and walked to the window, a habit he'd developed during their daily conversations. "You know what the funny thing is? I've spent years trying to buy loyalty, respect, and friendship. It turns out all I had to do was almost die on the floor of my office." Marcus laughed. "I don't recommend that as a networking strategy." "No, but I do recommend this. When life puts someone in your path who shows you genuine kindness, don't let them walk away. Because people like you, Marcus, are rarer than any business opportunity." As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the office that had brought them together, Marcus reflected on the strange turns life could take. He had entered that office as a janitor and emerged as an executive, but more importantly, he had found proof that human decency could transcend social boundaries. Sometimes the most valuable treasure isn't gold or stocks or real estate. Sometimes it's the discovery that beneath all the artificial barriers we create, we're all just people, capable of surprising each other with our capacity for kindness. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, that kindness gets recognized, rewarded, and transformed into something that changes not just one life, but two. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove human decency knows no social boundaries. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that will remind you of the power of doing the right thing, even when no one is watching.